Okay, we're going to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really fun review for you guys from the brand Seiko. A little about them. They were founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. And in terms of the type of watch, this is a classic field watch. Some key common characteristics and design when you're looking for something that falls within this category. Of course, you're going to be looking for a modest size, Arabic numerals, a 12 and 24-hour scale, and typically this would be seen in either a black or a cream dial. This is the Seiko 5 Sports SRPK41, and it is a 6,000 piece limited edition celebrating Seiko's 110th anniversary of watchmaking. So you'll see a couple of other special models with this particular color scheme because it does pay tribute to the original Seiko laurels of the very beginnings of Seiko's watchmaking. Now, this piece was lent in from Mimo's Jewelry. Yes, the world famous Mimo's Jewelry. If you guys are fans of Random Rob, I've been fortunate enough to kind of know Rob behind the scenes for quite some time now, and we've met up at a few of Mimo's meets. So it was only a matter of time before Mimo and I had a collaboration. So this is the first. We'll see, what other pieces Mimo would be happy to lend in the future. But if you guys are fans of Mimo's, you guys can get these in stock from mimosjewelry.com. One of the nice things is that they are not marking these up, even though they are limited editions, and they are actually pushing to stock them because Mimo knows that the majority of his customers are watch enthusiasts versus just kind of the average casual watch buyer. So that is a nice little combination to have. So with all of that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, now one thing I did want to have is of course out is another variation. This is the more standard variation of this model. It's just a Seiko 5 field watch, comes on a bracelet, but I will say there's a lot of improvements apart from just the aesthetic with this new model. So it's nice to kind of have them side by side just so you guys can get a bit of a look in terms of, if maybe you already own one of these, is it worth buying a new one? Or if maybe you've held off on purchasing one of these for a few reasons, if maybe this new one resolves some of those issues for you. So as you guys can see, this is still brand new. This will be sitting in his window probably in a display once this gets returned to him. But let's go ahead and take a little bit of a closer look and check out. Ooh, the colorway on here is really, really striking. Reminds me a bit of my Longines Heritage Military COSD in terms of having the hints of red playing off of, blue tone hands over a cream background. Very, very nice. It is a 39.5 millimeter diameter, 13.5 millimeters thick, and 47.8 millimeters lug to lug, brushed and polished stainless steel. It has a single curved, as you can see there, a bit of distortion when you get it at a very harsh angle, Hardlex mineral crystal. And again, Hardlex is not just your basic mineral crystal, it is their own in-house proprietary blend in terms of the compound. And I've yet to scratch a Hardlex crystal, but I have scratched many other regular mineral crystals. So take that for what you will. But for me, it's not like I baby my watches, but I do have a lot. So it's not like I beat them to death either. But I will say through regular wear, I've definitely scratched regular minimal crystals, just never a Seiko Hardlex. So I guess they're doing something right. Now, the crown is a push-pull crown. It has the Seiko automatic 4R36, so nice and simple there. It's basically going to be a hacking and hand winding 7S26. It has that nice display case back so you guys can see the movement. Has the little 5 signed on the rotor, but other than that, nothing too crazy. Actually, as this is happening, some of the plastic is falling there. Sorry about that. I'm just going to try to keep this in the same config that it was here. And luckily, we have a secondary watch that is pretty much the same footprint. So, we can get into some of those details on wrist and whatnot. And I can give you feedback from wearing without actually wearing this brand new watch. Now, getting into this dial, it's very, very cool. It has these raised It's a mixture of kind of raised and printed there. Actually, I think it feels like it's pretty much all raised. Like everything that's on the dial has a bit of a 3D nature to it. So it is painted at the end of the day in terms of, to make it pop. But you can see that apart from just that really nice grainy texture, the numerals, they pop up. They come out, you can see actually they also reflect really beautifully. Check that out. It's a little hard to capture, of course, because the crystal is gonna wash out a bit because it doesn't have any anti-reflective coating. But again, this is also just within the situation of being in the studio and having big bright studio lights. So, in real life, it's not going to be as harsh in terms of the reflections. But I do want to highlight there that this is a very three-dimensional dial. And apart from, again, just very handsome colorway and color combination, the dial itself is actually quite complex, which is pretty impressive, especially at this price point, $425. And that is the full retail price. And this does have a nice kind of matte off-white dial. It has the day-date complication there at 3 o'clock. You can see the blue Saturday set up very nicely. And then the speaking of blue, the hands are a coated blue. As you can see, they're not thermally heated, but at this price point for a brand this big that's making this many watches, guys, this is a limited edition and they're making 6,000 of them. So imagine how much they're making of ones that aren't limited, so it's really tough to hold that against them. And again, this is a brand with a lot of heritage. The Seiko brand founded all the way back in 1881, right? And into watches now for 110 years of that history. So very, very cool. It has 10 bar or 100 meters of water resistance, 20 millimeter lugs that are drilled. And one thing I really do want to mention as a huge highlight, apart again from just the aesthetic versus the non-limited model, is this bracelet is actually solid all the way around. Solid end links, solid links, 5-link setup, very similar to what you might see, let's say, from like an IWC pilot, right? Like it has that beautiful engineer old school. You guys have seen this bracelet style on a couple different Fliegers that I featured on the channel before, my Laco Pro Pilot. It's a beautiful look and really suits that military aesthetic, and also is quite lovely in terms of the way that it wears, because these are quite short links, right? You don't really need a half link when you have links that are this short and really nicely articulated because of that shortness. They do have push pin construction there, and this does taper from 20 millimeters down to about 17 and a half. But another upgrade, again, the plastic's coming off on here, sorry Mimo, I'll put it all back together, is this clasp. So check this out. It's longer, and you get 1, 2, 3, 4 spots for micro adjust, versus the standard model, shorter and only a 2-point micro adjust. So really just one choice, or two technically, right? But yeah, and then you can see hollow links. You can see the little seam there. Those are hollow end links. And everything else is you could say isn't much of a difference, but that bracelet alone, I really dig this bracelet, because this particular model line, there's actually a lot of different variations. There's even a Flieger style dial, which I have too. I don't have it, the time going on it to bring it into the video. I just remembered just now, but I would love to put this bracelet on that watch. Oh, that would look so good, because this watch doesn't really need to be on this bracelet because it comes with this beautifully done, check out this strap. I mean, nicely signed. It's actually quite supple and soft. It's a bit thick, but you know what? That thickness is going to lend to the durability. But if of course, if you do want to just keep it as a collector, you have it nicely secured to the pillow here, or you can put your watch on it. And I think that really livens up the dial. It makes it feel more within that vintage aesthetic, more within that field watch aesthetic. Whereas on the bracelet, it gives it a great everyday versatility, right? Everybody loves a good white dial watch on a steel bracelet. There's something about it. And then you also get the pops of color. So this is going to match with anything. Sure, it has red, white, and blue, but it's not saying you have to wear an American flag t-shirt. But clearly blue jeans, white t-shirt, this on, I mean, come on. You could basically be Top Gun Maverick with this piece at any point, and it's just going to kind of fit that really timeless casual aesthetic. For some of you that, hey, maybe you're into style like that, is something that is very versatile. While not being vanilla, there's nothing that's vanilla about this. Sure, it is a bit more subdued and sedate, but it is far from vanilla. There are just so many fine, fun details. And at the end of the day, it's a Seiko. So, you know, of course, this has its full linkage and everything. I don't want to mess with that. Whoever buys this, they'll get to do that. But what I can do is I'll just go ahead and put this, just kind of drape it. And if I was to close the clasp here, you can see there's quite a bit of room. So my 7.5-inch wrist has quite a bit of room there. So if you have a larger than 7.5-inch wrist, you're going to be able to get this around pretty easily as well. Of course, if I keep my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get some perspective distortion. So what I'll do is I'll keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here so that you guys can get a bit of a, you know, still a detailed look while seeing how this might wear on your own wrist, right? With less, again, of that perspective distortion, just a truer aspect ratio of how this sits on the wrist. And man, it's beautiful. Check out that bracelet, the light play on those short links and the brushing there and the contouring. It plays with the light really well. And then again, not in a way that's blingy, flashy. There's no polished surfaces on that. It is nice and satin. It just feels like a really well executed piece of machinery, a true tool watch. So I dig that. This thing looks really, really great. And of course, by comparison here, luckily there was, you know, extra links and this hasn't been fitted or anything. You know, it's going to wear very similar, but you know, this bracelet is quite hollow by comparison. And you know, of course, everything else is, yeah, it's a great look. I mean, here it's funny, you can actually see the numbers a bit more because of the black contrasting background versus here, you know, the numbers are going to have just a bit, I feel like, slight tint to them, but they might not. I mean, they just, it's cool, like your eyes and the way everything contrasts, it just keeps this thing legible. Even if you were to try to wash things out, like if you look at it at that angle, because of the 3D nature, you can still read every one of those points of information, which I really, really dig. So looks like we won't need the stunt watch too much in this video, but it is nice to see that there are quite a few upgrades because the price is also slightly upgraded. But again, the nice thing is Mimo selling these at MSRP, not marking them up, even though they are limited and a little bit tougher to find right now. There's definitely a lot of dealers, especially online, where you're going to find they will hoard some of these, especially overseas in Japan. There's a lot of dealers, especially because those units that are allocated to Japan are even more scarce. So they kind of have to mark things up. Here, you're not going to have to worry about that, which I think is pretty cool. So with that said, let's go ahead, get this piece off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay guys, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you can see, of course, that is one of the trade-offs. One, it's a field watch, and a traditional field watch at that. So don't necessarily expect too much Lume, but hey, Seiko always delivers a little bit extra there, so you can see. But the legibility, again, is more based off the numerals and the way they're going to reflect off of, you know, decent lighting conditions. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. Maybe include a bit of harsh lighting, which could expose any types of production defects, but all you're going to see there is a very uniform flow of light over that brushing. No, it is not luxury level. It's not Omega or Grand Seiko brushing there, but it does the job, and it's in terms of against its peers, I will say Seiko's never lacked in finishing at the price point. A lot of it is more about spec, but of course Seiko does have a wide range. They make everything. They're not just Seiko 5, but unfortunately a lot of people have kind of come to expect that everything should cost what a Seiko 5 costs, but then they wouldn't have a Presage or a Prospex, or there'd be no reason to get any of their other lines, right? So that doesn't really make sense. And that is an advantage that Swiss watches that are within the Swatch group have, is that, hey, let's say you're buying something and you might want to buy a Tissot or a Hamilton. You're not going to be asking why you didn't get the Omega qualities from your Tissot or Hamilton or your Certina. There's going to be no argument over that, but for some reason Seiko fans seem to ask why they're not getting Grand Seiko components, Grand Seiko timing out of things that don't cost Grand Seiko prices. So it's a quite a landscape, and that is, I've done quite a few rants about that over the years in terms of just understanding that Seiko's value proposition isn't based off of 3 random enthusiast driven models that were produced for over 20 years. Let's say the Sarb line, the Alpinist, the SKX. A lot of people decided that those were, that was their definition of what Seiko was. Those were some great models that you were able to get well underneath their market value for many years because they were overproduced. A lot of them were not international models in terms of the Sarb lines. Those were all Japanese domestic market only models. So when those gray market dealers were selling, they could make a lot of money because of the yen rate exchange. And also they weren't that desirable because they were very, very old. They were desirable to a small sliver of watch purchasers that are enthusiasts, and not everything is aimed at the enthusiasts. So yes, now that Seiko is more of a global brand in terms of its pricing structure, in terms of its release structure, those prices have had to adjust, and it is, it's completely fair in my eyes. And I know it's very easy to jump on the bandwagon and say Seiko's lost their way, things are just too pricey, too costly. Comparison, it's just like, a lot of people are comparing these watches from a heritage brand that's been around forever, that not only has been around, they've actually innovated and have horological significance, within their models, to a brand that is, a factory brand that makes a bunch of watches at a factory, and they decided to stamp their own logo on there as they're making, the high volume of watches. And saying like, yeah, hey, why can't everything cost that much? And it's just like, well, there's more than a factory that's making Seiko. There's a whole huge laundry list of artisans, marketers, office workers, designers. It's quite a network. It's a brand, again, that is fully robust and vertically integrated. So it just seems kind of silly to compare those things, and of course, yeah, some things are inflation and they're natural, and some things there are, for a brand to be successful, they do need to make a margin. There are no brands that are doing and selling you watches as part of charity, but enough on that kind of subject. The fact here is, guys, this is a watch that you can get for under $500. Closing thoughts on the wrist: it wears just about perfectly, very dialed in, and the thickness is not as noticeable as you might think. In terms of model variants, these are also available in standard non-anniversary trims if you're interested in this particular model. And of course, there's other models that have this anniversary trim applied to them in terms of their colorways. In terms of comparable models, sure, you can get a number of well-equipped field watches for around the same price, or even less in some cases, but the charm is pretty undeniable here. Bottom line, this is one of the coolest Seiko releases of the year, and it's really cool to see it available under $500. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please do hit subscribe for more comments or for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.